A very good morning to all my dear students. I hope all of you are in a good health. Today's topic is Japanese encephalitis. So let us start with the introduction. The first question arises when we heard Japanese encephalitis is why the disease is known as Japanese encephalitis and not Indian encephalitis, Indonesian encephalitis and anything else. The reason is that the first ever case of this kind of encephalitis occurred in Japan during 1870 and first time severe epidemic of this encephalitis also occurred in Japan during 1924. Afterwards, epidemics occurred almost annually till 1970. Since then, it has been declining in Japan but started in almost all Southeast Asian countries. The disease occurs in two forms, Japanese encephalitis A and Japanese encephalitis B. As type A virus disappeared from the nature long time ago, the alphabet has been removed from the name. So whenever we are talking about Japanese encephalitis, it is always Japanese encephalitis B unless otherwise specified. As the name suggests, encephalitis, it is an acute inflammation of brain caused by the Japanese encephalitis virus. Basically, the disease is a zoonotic disease. That means it is transmitted from animals to the man by the bite of infective female Culex mosquito. So, Japanese encephalitis is a zoonotic disease as well as vector-borne disease. Now, let's look at how the disease is distributed around the world. Japanese encephalitis is the leading cause of viral encephalitis in Asia and in almost 24 Asian and Western Pacific countries. The disease is rare in other parts of the world, and when seen, it is generally associated with travelers returning from the endemic areas. The annual incidence of a clinical disease ranges from less than 10 to more than 100 per 1 lakh population, and majority of the cases occur among the children less than 15 years of age, and nearly 10% of the cases are among those above 60 years. Now let us look at the scenario in India. The disease was first recognized in India in 1955 in Tamil Nadu. Now the disease is endemic in 23 states and union territories. Most of the cases are occurred in Assam, Bihar, Jharkhand, Uttar Pradesh, Karnataka, West Bengal and Tamil Nadu. And they contribute about 80% of the cases and deaths. This slide shows the Japanese encephalitis affected district in various states. In comparison with the population exposed to mosquito bite, the incidence is very small. That means not all the person bitten by the infective mosquito will get the disease, but only 1 in 300 to 1000 bitten person will get the disease. That means for every single clinical case, there will be 300 to 1000 subclinical infections. Now going forward to look at the epidemiological determinants of the disease. So first of all, agent factors. The causative agent is an arbovirus, which is neurotropic in nature, and it is easily destroyed by heat and chemicals. If we look at the reservoir of infection, the chief reservoirs are animals and water birds. And among the animals, pigs are the natural host. They never suffer from the disease, but they can infect the mosquitoes. They only help in the multiplication of the virus, and thus pigs are called the amplifier host. This is very important. For Japanese encephalitis, pigs are called the amplifier host. It is frequently asked in MCQs. Another important animals are the cattle. Neither they suffer nor they act as an amplifier host, but they act as an attractant. That means when the pigs are not available for blood meal, the mosquitoes feed on cattle. In other words, we can say that cattle prevent the mosquitoes from biting human beings. Among the animals, horses are the only animals which develop manifestation of encephalitis. Among the birds, the ardite birds, pond herons, poultry ducks, and cattle ergates constitute the reservoir. Again, they do not suffer from the disease, but they act as a source of infection. Now let's see about the vectors. The chief vectors are of Culex group of mosquitoes. And among the various species, the important species are Culex tritaniorhynchus, Culex visnui, and Culex pseudovisnui. The average lifespan of a mosquito is about 20 days, and it can fly for 1 to 3 kilometers. These vectors are primarily outdoor resting in vegetation and other shaded places, but in summer may also rest indoors. They are principally cattle feeders, though human and pig feeding are also recorded in some areas. This table shows various species of Culex that has been isolated from various states. So we can see that Culex tritaniorhynchus and Culex visnui are the most commonly isolated species. Now, host factors. As I already told, for every single case of Japanese encephalitis, there are about 300,000 subclinical cases. There is no carrier state. But important thing is that even the cases do not act as a source of infection, because there is a short period of viremia and a low level of circulating virus in the blood. So there will be no availability of a virus to the mosquito when they come for the feed. Thus, even though infected human beings are the reservoirs, they are not the source of infection. Only animals are the source of infection. If we look at the age, incidence of Japanese encephalitis is high among the children below 5 years. Adults and elderly persons are immune because of repeated subclinical infection and development of immunity. Incidence is more among boys than among the girls because of the outdoor movement and mosquito exposure. However, subclinical infections are equal in both the sexes. Environment also plays an important role. Atmospheric temperature of about 20 degrees Celsius favors the virus, and relative humidity of about 70% are favorable for the mosquitoes to survive longer. Incubation period of the disease is from 5 to 15 days. But we also need to know about the extrinsic incubation period. That is, the period required for the virus to multiply in the body of Culex mosquito to reach an optimum number when the vector is said to have become infective. It is about 10 to 12 days. Now, how the disease is transmitted? The disease is transmitted from animal to animal and birds and animal to man by the bite of female infective Culex mosquito. Again, remember, the disease is not transmitted from person to person, and therefore for Japanese encephalitis, man is a dead end host. Now let us look at the clinical features. The disease has a three-stage: prodromal stage, acute encephalitic stage, and late stage and sequelae. The prodromal stage is characteristic by sudden onset of fever with other constitutional symptoms, and this stage lasts for 1 to 2 days. In acute encephalitic stage, the fever becomes still higher, up to 103 to 104 degree Fahrenheit, and we can also see the signs and symptoms of brain involvement like neck rigidity, vomiting, convulsion, altered sensorium, disorientation, etc. The child may die within about 8 to 10 days. The case fatality rate is about 40%, which becomes 80% during the epidemics. And among those who recover will develop a sequel in the late stage. So the late stage occurs among those who recover. More than 50% of them develop neurological and psychological deficits. Now, how the disease is diagnosed? First, by clinical signs and symptoms, and second, by the various laboratory methods. We can detect antibody by various methods available, or we can detect the antigen. We can also detect the genome through RT-PCR, or we can isolate the virus by tissue culture or infant mice. So there are various laboratory methods available for the diagnosis of Japanese encephalitis. For the management of the disease, there is no specific treatment available. Only symptomatic and supportive treatment is given. Isolation of the patient in the hospital, preferably in the dark room, because the patient is very sensitive to sensory stimuli. Again, remember, the disease is not transmitted from person to person. So the isolation for the Japanese encephalitis is for patient only, so that we can treat him better. Now, prevention and control. First, we need to understand where we can intervene to break the chain of transmission. We all know the reservoirs. We all know how the disease is transmitted. So, we can act in these two manners. First, elimination of the reservoir. This refers to only animal reservoirs. Although humans are reservoirs, but they are not acting as a source of infection. The pigs and cattle are eliminated by construction of pigsties and cattle sheds at least 3 km away from the human habitation. Because Culex mosquito can fly up to the 3 kilometers. So how we can break the channel of transmission? This consists of control of factors. We can use anti-larval measures, we can use anti-adult measures. This thing has already been covered, so I will not go into much of the details. But in anti-larval measures, we can use physical method, chemical method, biological method, biocide method. In anti-adult measures, there is indoor and outdoor spraying. Important thing here is that all the infected villages and uninfected villages within the radius of 3 kilometers are covered. For indoor spray, malathion is used once in the fortnight for 3 fortnights. Outdoor spraying, this consists of ultra low volume fogging. There are two methods for this outdoor spraying: ground level thermal fogging and aerial application technique. You have already seen the fogging, right? It is done in campus also. There is a special machine called TIFA machine, TIFA. It is fitted to the open jeep vehicle, and then the machine is driven slowly at the speed of 5 to 6 km per hour on the roads of the villages. The favorable time for a fogging is early morning or a late evening because the air is cool and it forms the fine fog. Next is the aerial application technique. This is done by using a special single engine, single seated monoplane aircraft called Basant agriculture aircraft, which is used for ultra low volume fogging over the paddy fields. It flies about 40 meters above the ground level at a stretch for about 1.5 hours without refueling. 3 such applications are required on the day 1st, 3rd and the 12th for the satisfactory control of mosquitoes. This is the Basant agricultural aircraft. Next comes the protection of the susceptible. This is done by the immunization. There is only active immunization and no passive immunization is available. There are 2 types of Japanese encephalitis vaccine currently available: live attenuated and killed vaccine. In our schedule, we are using the live attenuated vaccine. So the strain used in live attenuated Japanese encephalitis vaccine is SA14142. The dose is 0.5 ml. Subcutaneous. It is given on the left upper arm. Schedule is the first dose at 9 to 12 months and second dose at 16 to 24 months. Precaution that should be taken is that it should be used within an hour of reconstitution. So after an hour, whatever the vaccine remains, it should be discarded. So this is how we can prevent the Japanese encephalitis: by elimination of the reservoir, by controlling the vectors and breaking the chain of infection, and by immunizing the susceptibles. So this is all about Japanese encephalitis. Thank you very much.